Dobry wieczór Państwu. Pod nieobecność koleżanki prezes w imieniu zarządu oddziału SARP chciałem wszystkich powitać serdecznie na kolejnym wykładzie z cyklu Mistrzowie Architektury. No chyba dzisiaj mamy rekord frekwencji. Wojtek, tak?
Jeszcze tej sali nie zapełniliśmy do tej pory, a widzę, że u Ciebie dzisiaj wielki powrót po latach na scenę.
Nie no, nie. Ja tu jestem małym miśkiem, bo chodzi o naszą wykładowczynię. Natomiast w ogóle tak się trafiło, że faktycznie dwóch Wojtków dzisiaj stoi na scenie, także panie Wojtku, co tam u pana?
Podobno nie ma przypadków, nic się nie dzieje przez przypadek.
No, właśnie. Także serdecznie witam wszystkich i oddaję głos, bo Wojtek jest obecnie kuratorem cyklu, także jakbyś parę słów proszę powiedział organizacyjnych.
Także witam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie i dziękuję Wam za tak liczne przybycie. Mamy przed sobą bardzo ciekawą wiosnę, podczas której wysłuchamy opowieści o dwóch najważniejszych obiektach kulturalnych w Norwegii. Pierwsza z tych opowieści już dziś, mam tu na myśli oczywiście operę w Oslo. Natomiast tematem kwietniowego wykładu będzie obiekt, który powstał kilka lat później, natomiast doczekał się opinii rywala opery w Oslo. Jeżeli chodzi o wykład kwietniowy, to jego szczegóły będziemy ujawniać już w ciągu kilku najbliższych dni na naszym Facebooku i Instagramie, natomiast dzisiaj chciałbym się skupić już tylko na Snøhetta. Na samym początku chciałbym powitać członków zarządu katowickiego oddziału SARP. Chciałbym powitać pana architekta miasta Katowice, Stanisława Podkańskiego. Dziękujemy Wam za przybycie. A wracając do spraw organizacyjnych. Wiecie dobrze o tym, że od już jakiegoś czasu mamy profil na Facebooku. Natomiast niedawno powstał również profil Mistrzów Architektury na Instagramie. Gorąco chciałbym zaprosić do obserwowania, ponieważ znajdziecie tam wiele interesujących rzeczy na temat naszego cyklu, jak również na temat architektury w ogóle, dlatego naprawdę warto. Ostatnio na Instagramie była do wygrania ta oto książka, Snøhetta People, Proces, Projects. I dzisiaj, tuż po zakończeniu wykładu, a przed częścią z pytaniami z sali, ogłosimy dwóch zwycięzców, którzy wygrają te oto książki i będą też mieli możliwość zdobycia podpisu i dedykacji od naszej mistrzyni. Poza tym, abstrahując od nagród i książek, wiele informacji będzie się pojawiać najpierw na naszym Facebooku, najpierw na Instagramie, a dopiero później na naszym Facebooku, dlatego poprzez obserwowanie profilu o wielu rzeczach będziecie wiedzieli po prostu wcześniej. Na przykład o tym, że rozpoczęła się już rejestracja na kolejny wykład z cyklu Mistrzowie Architektury. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to introduce this amazing woman representing Snøhetta, a really wonderful office based in Oslo. Today I had the pleasure to spend a day with Jette Hopp, and I'm really impressed by her competence, by her energy and by her enthusiasm. She very often takes part in international conferences where she shares her experience with other architects and students. For example, yesterday she was in Germany, in Frankfurt, where she took part in a panel discussion about concert halls. Today, she made time to come to Katowice to speak about integration between architecture and nature. Here is the Snøhetta project director. Please welcome Jette Hopp.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting Snøhetta and myself to this wonderful location. I'm super impressed of your interest in architecture. So many people attending this lecture this evening. Thank you very much for your interest in our work. And thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I spent a very nice day, and I had also a historic walk through your nice city, and I'm very impressed also about the new development that is happened within the last decade. So I hope that also will lead to a renewed development within your context. Okay, so today I will share with you a series of projects, of course, but before that I will talk about a little bit about our background and especially the way we work, because that's the basis for all our projects that we do. So in the background, you see the mountain Snøhetta. It's where we have our name from. That's at least the official story. So it's the second highest mountain in Norway. It's 2,240 meters high. And it's part of the so-called Dovre area in Norway, an area that is full of mountains. And the other story for the name is when the very beginning, it's actually in the end of 80s, we had our first office above a brown bar called the Dovre. And of course, then the name for an office that has its location, this office above this brown bar, Dovre, like the area from the mountain Snøhetta, must be Snøhetta. Okay. And from the very beginning, we started as a collaborative workshop consisting of architects and landscape architects and interior architects. And this transdisciplinary approach, that is something that we have maintained through all our history, I can say. We are now been active for 30 years, so we all also now are starting to post-rationalizing our methods, and that's also a very interesting approach when we kind of re-evaluate our own design. In the background, you see an image from a tour we do every year. As you might know, from the very beginning we were only a bunch of architects, but now we have grown into an international company. We have our main offices in Oslo and New York, but we also have an office in Innsbruck. In Paris recently we opened an office, and in Adelaide and San Francisco. So we are now 180 people. So every year we meet at Snøhetta, at this Dovre, and we do a mountain walk together. And after that walk, we discuss our strategy, our method, and also our future so-called Dovre conversation. And this gives us a very good opportunity also to meet physically, because it's also to maintain our cultural values within working internationally, because what is kind of the basis for all our work is also that we have this, we are coming from the Nordic direction, meaning that all our projects we strive for equality, democracy, and openness and accessibility. So these are values that are very much embedded in the Nordic culture, but these are also values we are addressing actively when we are going abroad on our project. Also when they are not obviously kind of part of a program or something like that. So here you see we are ready to go on the mountain, and what we always try within our company is to maintain 50% men and women. That's very important. Also, we are represented within 30 nationalities, so that's also this kind of international approach is also reflected within the company itself. So here you see an overview of our offices. It started in Oslo, and then it walked over to New York with some project that we won there, and then also I forgot the Stockholm office. That's a smaller one that we also have. And as you can see here, a concentration of our projects, and they are, as you can see, mostly in the European market, but also in the US and in some of the Asian areas as well. Here you see a bird view of our location of the Oslo office and the New York office, and it seems like we like to be at the seaside, that we enjoy the kind of similar location independent where we are on the map. This is an impression from our Oslo office. We sit in an old warehouse that we have refurbished into an office space, and also giving us this contact with a kind of ship traffic, the ferries coming in and leaving Oslo again, also kind of a symbol of the contact of the world. Generosity, that's a very important part and kind of value within all our work, meaning that it means also very much something for our work culture, meaning the sharing of knowledge, not keeping it for ourselves. That's the kind of main force also when we work with teams on our project. So this kind of joy of sharing, it's very important, and that's also hopefully reflected within our project, that also that kind of generates a specific generosity in the built and final result. So this is also reflected in our workspace. Here you get a glance of our office space. Again, this contact with the world. And it's also reflected in the way we have organized ourselves. This is a classic open floor office But what we did, we are not organizing ourselves within projects, because we think when the different projects managers and members are spread within the area, then on your way to your next office member, like if you, for example, are part of the yellow of just as a symbol of the yellow project, then you will get a lot of information on your way to your next project member, and that means that we maintain a continuous level of shared information within this kind of structural approach. Transpositioning. Within our transdisciplinary approach, we have developed also our own work method. It started internally, since we have all the disciplines in-house and also invited others, meaning it's a kind of method where we encourage each other to leave the profession itself, but bring everything that is related to your personal interest on your table, and make this kind of communicate the different aspects in a project development or at the very start, and share this information to bring the whole picture in the beginning, to have this holistic approach and to swap also professions. So we encourage the architect to become a client, the client to become the landscape architect, and so on, to just leave the limited box and the direction of your professional view. So from that's also a little bit like our lunch table. We eat every day together lunch from 12 to 12:30. We have an own chef that prepares our meal. And then how this kind of situation also evolves within the day. Idea work. The method of transpositioning, we have kind of rationalized our internal method. And we have been part of a research project initiated from the Norwegian research facility called Idea Work, where we, within a series of years, were observed together with other companies that are working with innovation, if there are some generic drivers within the industry that one can say are kind of the generic framework for innovation. And we kind of post-rationalized our method in a way, being a part of that research project. And we identified some specific elements that have to be present if Snøhetta should be at its best, meaning that we kind of come into this innovative direction. So from that we have identified some of the creative drivers that we have put into a certain method that we are using in the so-called Conceptual Workshop. So with this workshop, we start, or at least we try to start all our projects. So it starts with a phase. You must envision a day like this, that we gather the client, the team, and other stakeholders within a day in our office. And together we spend a day and we develop in certain stages. We exchange ideas, and it's a very playful manner, and some of a very associative level, and then it goes more in-depth project related. And we use our state-of-the-art workshop to conceptualize the initial idea, leading to a so-called conceptual springboard. So and here you see the first step is so-called prepping. So we use something we call the card game, where we, within a series of images, associate the value of a project. What do we want to be? What do we not want to be? So it's a part of the kind of value research on a very associative level, but it leads very fast to kind of some key elements for a project identity. And then we try, from this initial discussion, to conceptualize one of these kind of aspects of that discussion. So we use our workshop. We have quite a large workshop in all of our offices, and we have a workshop leader that maintains all our machines. So within that workshop sequence, we create something we call this conceptual springboard. It's not necessarily an architectural idea or expression, but it has to do with the identity of a project. And we can see within this co-creation in the very beginning of a project, we see that this leads also to a long-term maintenance of the core value of a project. And also, when a client has contributed to this first development, it means also he will become the stakeholder of the concept. And also, when you have a strong concept, that will also maintain then the overall idea of the project and also allow for changes when we have this robust core in the center. And of course, we are using a lot of methods in our projects, like the rapid prototyping. As I mentioned to you, we have this large workshop where we kind of very early test also the physical consequences of our ideas. And that has to do also with the full range of process. Of course, it's kind of the different methods informing each other. We're working very analog, of course, and then how the digital analog and digital kind of informs each other. So, of course, and that's something which we can experience within the overall architectural scenes, the access to different tools also leads to different answers. And for example, the opera was very, very simple approach with folding paper. And then, of course, we used 3D printing and the laser cutting that also leads to extraordinary results. So we are in the lucky position that we also have this 7-axis robot. We bought it when we actually didn't have the money to buy it, but now we are very happy that we did so. And we were able to summarize our method and the processes and the people and how the way we work within the exhibition that we had in the Danish Architectural Center in 2005, I think it was. So we called it People, Process, Projects, because it starts with the people, and the processes that are generated through the people then leads to the project. So they are in the end the physical result of the former steps. So within this exhibition, we created a miniature of our working environment. Here you see the kind of the exchange situation. And also we created a small workshop area, so work in process, where you were able to have this touch and feel experience, look into several work in process situation. And then we have this classical display room where we had a display of all finished and ongoing project and also model and one-to-one mock-ups. So how does this generosity aspects lead, how is that reflected in our project and projects? And of course, the most prominent example for this, I would always say, is the opera. You might have heard about the Opera House, and before I go into the more detailed and architectural related thing, I think it's very important that one take one step back and reflect about where does this approach actually come from. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. We have something in Norway that calls allemannsretten, the right to roam, meaning that we have a cultural heritage within our laws that allows everyone to inhabit nature independent of property rights. So meaning land is it's a public ownership. So the only limit is that you have to put up your tent with a specific distance to a building or a house. So this is a basic approach to public space. And this we try to kind of reflect within our approach for the opera. So it has very clear landscape references. So we have this accessible roof that has this direct link to a landscape and an accessible space. And it's also has something to do that an opera, it's a very new Norway is in a way a very new cultural country. So the opera and ballet has continental references in a way. It's not kind of a typical Norwegian or Nordic thing. So we thought it was also important to kind of to create an environment that also is inviting, that kind of takes down the barrier, that also offers something else than only a ticketed venue where you have to buy a ticket, but also to create a public plaza and to limit kind of the border between this kind of high culture and the more accessible approach. So the roof was in a way a gift back to the city and also allowed the citizens of the city to inhabit the space. And also in terms of materiality, this approach was reflected to the choice of materials. So we limited the choice of material and they had clear references to nature. So as you see here, this is an inside-outside situation. And also we worked for the foyer as an extension of the public uncommercial space, the big carpet. So we worked very actively also with the opera to allow access inside the building with open access without ticketing and also have extended opening hours. So this is actually an interior public space, and this is something which we find quite crucial, especially in our climate. If we're talking about public space, it's not enough to talk about outside public space. So you see the wooden wall, that is kind of a little bit the barrier, or not the barrier, but it's a transition between kind of the more protected opera performance area and the world or the city of Oslo. So we use the reference of the tree, and you see this kind of the more roughness, the outside of the tree, and the more you get into the core of the projects, the main performance space, the tree surface gets more and more refined. So this is the main performance saal. It's called the Store Saal in Norwegian. It has 1,400 seats. And it still has a very, I think it has an unbeaten level of technology. I haven't heard, and the opera was opened in 2008, so I think it's still at the edge of also technology and acoustical aspects. And also the opera has a lot of art project integrated. I don't know how it's in Poland, but in Norway it's 1% of all public projects goes into art. So also the scene carpet was an art project by the artist called Pei, and it looks like aluminum, but it's actually a fabric. It's actually a woven structure. And also the opera roof was an art project, so we involved actively 3 artists in creating these different surfaces. And again, it's all about the future generation. So I think that in terms of accessibility, we also try to include the whole range. And that's more the Norwegian style. That's where we actually come from. And I think where the opera is at its best is when you have a public venue on the roof, like here you have an open air concert, and then simultaneously you can have an opera venue inside the building. So the acoustic conditions allows for that types of parallel performances. So it's kind of similar to say we use the ground twice, and also programmatic-wise, that's possible here, as you can see. A step back in time, I'll take you to Egypt, to Alexandria. And this was actually our first project. That was an open competition that we won in the end of 80s. And it was about the public library in Alexandria. And funny enough, and I have to look here at the slide, because 80 of the 524 entries were pyramids, conceptual-wise, in that open competition. And that's really, I think, a little funny approach. And if you imagine the Louvre, for example, in Paris, there was something with pyramids at this time. But we tried something completely different, and that's something also that illustrates very well our conceptual approach, because all our projects are very much born out of the specific site-specific conditions and trying to transferring that into in situ concepts in a way. So that's why one also can say that our projects are content-driven, not style-driven. Also, that means that that approach also avoids generic formalism. So for the opera, for the Alexandria Library, it started with a very, very simple line. a line actually crossing the horizon. And then we have this kind of very simple initial idea. It's very easily then to evolve this further. And for our library, it started a little bit that this line could also mean the line in time, that everything that is located underground has to do with the past, and everything that's above ground, that's the future. And where the line intersects with the horizon, that's the true presence in a way. And we use that timeline also to allocate the program. And when it comes on the overall composition, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the first microchip, but these were very circular, very circular shape, and it's represented in a way the knowledge of the world. So that we also try to kind of reflect in our library approach. So it has two sides in a way. It has this kind of section that some of the project is located underground and on ground and above ground. But the facade that is facing the sea and the world, that is built in a very high technology way. And here you see the open reading room, and I think it's still the largest of its kind. And as far as I remember, I think it's 36,000 square meters. And it goes with like a vineyard with several terraces underground. And then we had the facade that is facing Alexandria, the old town. And here we worked also very actively with the artists. And the whole facade is representing all the different languages of the world, and we work with local craftsmanship, you can see here, and also with this kind of transdisciplinary approach, also with traditional craftsmanship, high technology knowledge, and kind of this combination also then leads to surprising results. And also we were very touched when we got these images from the director of the library within the Arabic Spring, where there was very much the fear that the library could be damaged by demonstration and so on. But the opposite, they built actually a human ring around the building. And that could also make one thinking that if you really put value and public ownership into a built situation or architecture, that also helps then to maintain also then this public value and also the architecture itself. And it is a little bit also reflected in the refurbishment of the Times Square, which also then which we did within our New York office, and it was the transformation of the very much trafficked situation into a public plaza. And also then with the post-occupancy studies we have just recently started with, just to see how the number of accidents and just to kind of what I call the post-rationalization. But we have always our own research going on, also following our project when we have given them to our clients, and especially with our public projects. And also another project that we have in New York in 2004, Snøhetta was commissioned with the only cultural building on the 9/11 memorial site. And our task was to solve the visitor center for the site. And it was a very difficult task, and also the program went through several stages. But what was very important for us to create a situation where it was possible that everyone can bring its own history to the site, and also then within the self-reflection, within the context, also then be able to kind of link this to your personal history, but also then to the history of the New Yorkers and the site itself. So somehow create the kind of sheltered environment, the only horizontal building also in a way, but then allow for this interaction. I will show you now a project that we have built in Canada, in Toronto, and I think it's also a very interesting approach in terms of interior public space. It's called the Ryerson University Learning Center in Toronto, and it's basically an informal how could I say, study or study center for students. And the reason for this building was basically that there was a lack of study space in Toronto. And all the students lived in very, very tiny flats, and also the study spaces and the rehearsal rooms and libraries were very limited. So this building has, its only purpose is to give students free space for unprogrammed self-study and learning. So we try to use references from a landscape, also within the belief that also different kind of physical conditions also can create differentiation in also learning conditions and behavior. So as you can see here, we try to program the different stories of the building with different atmospheres borrowed from landscape motifs. And it's a very robust building and with a simple materialization. And this, for example, I think it's the park room, and this is the beach zone. And also we saw that the way the students inhabited the spaces, they really took ownership to it. And we saw that it's created different learning situation, also hopefully leading to another way of thinking. And if you think about the old Greek spaces where the real exchange of knowledge and cultural development happened within the communication with others, nothing that you can read, you have to kind of experience yourself. And that's what we try to create this environment for, to kind of base on that tradition of philosophic tradition of exchange. Another project that I also want to present, show you in terms of public space, more than on a museum aspect, is the Sf Moma Extension that was completed just a few years ago. And the starting point for this project was a building by Mario Botta, an architect that is might be well known for you. And our task was to extend the museum with additional, of course, exhibition space. But we thought that it was also very important to make this new extension to increase the accessibility within the urban fabric, because San Francisco is has quite kind of unclear directions in a way, and we hoped that our building would help to kind of also generate another type of accessibility. So we formed it very much based on the urban grid, and also create and extend the number of entrance and accessibility points, and also go more in dialogue with the city context. And also we introduced additional program like free galleries without ticketing, free Wi-Fi, so that it also kind of is included in the public area in a way. So again, the topic with the interior public spaces that we have on our agenda, and that we also actively address in all our projects, also to increase the consciousness of our clients in this way. Another project that we have currently on our drawing table is the new headquarters for Le Monde in Paris. You might know that Le Monde, it has an outstanding reputation within the world of news. It's applicable. It's it's maybe the newspaper with the highest reputation, at least in Europe. So that was invited. That was an invited competition that we won. And our basic approach was to kind of create a bridge for this site, because it was originally the project, or the site were divided in two. So, and also the regulation allowed in a way only for kind of create two independent situations. But we thought it was very important that we create an architecture that is also had a symbolic effect in a way, like Le Monde and the building as a bridge between Le Monde and the world. So we used this kind of metaphor actively when we worked with the site. So I have to need a little water, but I can speak while filling. So as you can see here on the left side, this was the regulation that was actually possible. That was the basic for the competition brief. And we showed within a series of kind of intervention that by relocating masses, we create in a way the same volume, but we managed to kind of create this bridging effect. And also that is reflected within the materiality of the building. We wanted to create this pixelated effect, like the kind of the news and the level and the complexity of information that Le Monde also is representing. And you can see it here from the plan. As you can see here, that it has two kind of entrance situation. And also, we introduced here also some public interior program, like a gallery space, like an information center. And Le Monde was really brave because we had the situation in France that you all know about, where they also could kind of increase their level of security. But they stick to their original concept to allow to have us on the ground level, all this kind of vulnerable in a way program, because that allowed also for people to go into the building, and also that increases the potential of attack in a way. But still we were able to develop and refine the program as we have proposed, and that was also one of the reasons why we won the competition. So you can see here the stomach, we have this kind of bridging, the materiality that we have a light installation also that we can program, and that also has to kind of something to do with the news and the speed of information. And here I brought you a facade section because it's actually a very simple facade solution where we worked with different layers of glass and transparency on a very kind of basic structural approach, but and a series of repetitive formats in a way, but still it required quite some high technical skills in terms of model, also 3D modeling. So here you see some images and of the public situation, the entrance. Yeah, rapid prototyping. As I introduced to you in the very beginning, the workshop method is very important for us when we develop form in our projects. So I will show you one project that we were commissioned to do for the Reindeer Association in Norway. So we are again at the mountain Snøhetta. And the task was to create a small observation pavilion to be able to observe wildlife. So very basic commission. So these are the kind of the object that we are looking at, and it also brings us back to our area where we have our annual conversation. And when we then go into a task like this, we always very carefully make an analysis of the local context. What are the typical materials? What are the topography? What are the culture, political aspects of a site? And here it was very clear for us that we have to work with how human inhabit nature. And this is a small gapahuk that you can see on the left. It's a shelter for hunting in Norway. Very, very old, simple structure, and then of course the bonfire. And also we looked into local craftsmanship that is very refined in the area. And a very typical building structure also, of course, from the agricultural is this very simple form. And with this kind of basic collection of impressions, we started then our approach and borrowed the proportions from this very traditional building, transforming it to an outer shell. And then we worked very much with the complexity of the interior, creating this kind of soft wooden interior, also building prototypes at our workshop, and then this 3D model was transferred to a bold building company that we also have worked with at the opera interior. So we have this kind of long links and preferred collaborations, and then the interior was shipped on the truck. and then installed on site. So this building, we call it, it goes into a series that we call keyless structures, because it's basically a public building also. It's open 24 hours, and you can go there with your family and friends, and you can also stay there overnight. No one will throw you out. And also we as Snøhetta, we gather there before we go to the mountain, we have a small conversation situation here. So I think this also reflects very well the way we work, even though it's a very simple building, but when we kind of work with the different layers of complexity and also research from a contextual part. So it's very much a very good example for what we call our approach. We call ourselves contextual conceptualists. But it's in a way a result of the way we work. And the rapid prototyping, I will show you another very interesting example. I think this is Bjarne Melgaard. It's one of the most famous contemporary artists in Norway at the time. He also has a studio in New York. And together with him, we got the task, or for him, together and for him, a so-called house to die in. So it's actually a one single family house for this artist. And the process was very, very interesting, because we worked very, very closely together with him. And you can see here some of his sketches. And we tried to transfer these sketches, and that's also very reflected in the way he works, to try to transform it into a three-dimensional space. So it was much about scanning and also modeling. So this very, very literal co-creation process also led to a very unconventional result. So this is actually what it will look like. And of course, it has created a lot of discussion in Oslo, because this site is very close to the former atelier of the very famous Norwegian artist Edvard Munch. And strangely enough, within that area, there are a lot of artists living. So they raised really protest campaigns against this building. But it seems that we will be able to realize it. This discussion has been ongoing for years. But we are quite optimistic that we will manage to realize this building. It's an experiment, of course, but it's at the edge of a kind of collaboration process in a way. So here you can see our way of experimenting with the facade. We used an old Japanese tradition to burn the outer layer of the wood, because that gives you weather protection. And we were also able to exhibit one-to-one mock-up at the ICA in London with an exhibition of the process. So also a very interesting, very baroque approach in a way. Knowledge-based intuition. That's a very important kind of one of our creative drivers, and that we encourage ourselves also to constantly rethink and redevelop our method. And I will show you this with an example that we have developed after we won an invited competition in 2007 for the King Abdulaziz Center of Culture. So this is a site for the oil company Saudi Aramco, and the task was to create a cultural center, and the location is actually in the desert. So here you see our result from the competition, and you have to think about the program within that kind of cultural context. There is no such as public culture, and this program, it's a huge cultural development. It's about 120,000 square meters, and the program consists of the public cinema. You don't have that in Saudi Arabia. It's a children's museum, another kind of traditional museum, learning center, children's center, educational parts. So what you can think of what has to do with culture and education was allocated within that approach. So our kind of entrance and conceptual kind of approach for this project was to think about it as a kind of composition of elements that are dependent on each other. So just to show that cultural has this kind of interactive approach, and like a Roman arch, that you can't remove one of the stones because then the whole composition will throw together. And that's also kind of the culture. See culture as the keystone in society, and that's also where we located one part of the program, as you can see here. The core of the project was the keystone, and that was actually at first we had the children's center there because that has something to do with the future. And also we used the timeline, past, present, future for this project. And that has to do with the programming of the project. So we took everything that has to do with history and museum underground, and that the educational parts that was located in the highest point of the building. So here you see the rendering from the composition and a little bit of the build-up of the project from outside. And here you see the ground floor, and it's a super complex program. So what we created here was a kind of interior plaza where we had the entrances for the different kind of cultural programs, like the auditorium, library, museum, and so on. And it shows, this image shows very well when you have a strong initial concept. It's so easy, or not so easy, but there's a certain logic within when you agree upon a concept and how you can refine and develop the different layer of an architecture. So here was a discussion about the facade, and of course we started with the keystones, and then we make this kind of analysis how the kind of lines around the stone, and that led us to a very kind of natural flow of how we develop the facade. And here you see the one-to-one mock-up. So it's actually steel pipes that are kind of mounted around the different volumes with a 5 centimeter diameter. And we had actually also a mock-up in front of our own office, because just to experience how is the kind of physical presence of that solution. And also a lot of these programs also do not require daylight. So in this situation where we wanted to have daylight, we just squeezed the pipes. So they had a kind of flattened diameter. And then they kind of were transitioned again to a circular format. So here you see it from the building side. And that project was really an adventure. I think I have, and I was also part of that. So I haven't ever, and I maybe will not ever experience a project like that. It was a fantastic travel, also together with the client, sticking to the original concept, really being true to the agreements one has made on the path. And here you see some renderings, and this is from the construction site. End of last year, that was the library, the stairway to heaven, as we called it, and this is from the Great Hall that has to do with natural history and some impressions, the museum renderings, but it will actually be like that. So it's a really fantastic project. So here you see it as it was, and also I think what is also important when you have a very strong concept, and you have put some knowledge and energy also to develop this very, very important phase, and that's reflected in most of our projects. The build result is very, very similar to the conceptual or the competition proposal or the very, very first conceptual design. Another project that we have built in the Austria, and that was also the start for our office in Innsbruck, and they are about 30 people now. That was a part of the Swarovski area, and it is a vertical play tower. So there was a little bit experimenting with the field, indoor-outdoor situation for children. So we work very closely with Swarovski. You might know these small crystallines. They have this jewelry, but also have this crystalline small animals and stuff. So we work very closely with them to create a pattern and a frit, and also for the interior, look at the surroundings and also using the colors of the surrounding nature and so on, and try to use that as a basis for our interior development. and also have this kind of customized approach within a topology that didn't exist before. I mean, so we also had to go through all the regulation, and in Germany you have this, or Austria you have this TÜV, and all the stamps in terms of security, but we managed to go through all these stages as well. And also it has a nice cafe situation, and so on. The continuous state of reinvention that we are putting ourselves in, you could say it's also a little bit being in a constant process, that we are not kind of reproducing our ideas, but it's also meaning that you have to always ask yourself and reflect very carefully if you are on the right path, and also stick to your method. So I will show you a project, an invited competition that we won in France, in Lascaux, and it's the Lascaux Cave 4 Museum. And it's actually a very interesting history behind, because this area in the Dordogne in Montpilliac, that's a mecca for prehistoric sites. I think at least in this area, you have 15 sites within that quality. So in 1940, one of the cages were discovered by coincidence, and they were open to public for a series of years, but then you very early saw that all the kind of the occupancy with the visitors also destroyed this kind of historic heritage. So one had to invent a way of making this part of the history accessible, but to find a smart way to deal with that. So in the end of 80s, one made the decision that there should be a visitor center, and it took some decades before that was kind of put into action, but at least it resulted in a competition that we won. And we tried very carefully, because that was a lot of the program, it's about caves, it's underground. So how do you then deal with the situation? So we tried to create an approach where we only made small scissors within the landscape. So it's a more building landscape than an architecture in a way. So here you see some of the competition renderings, because a very interesting part of the program was a replica of the existing cave. So that required a process that is really unbelievable. It was the total scanning of the existing cave and then reproducing it to an accessible part of the visitor center to really experience one-to-one how it is to be in a cave. So we created then different sequences. This is still from the competition, so it's also part of a digital display. So it's actually a kind of path where one is to go through this replica of a cave, and then there are some display areas where you kind of learn about history and so on, and some breakout zones. So here you see a digital section of the project, and here you see the complexity of the reproduced geometry. And that also required from our side, I'm really admiring this digital skills in a way, also transferring it to a buildable architectural, because that was actually had to be reproduced. So you see here the quite complex build-up of how it was constructed. And also one funny thing was also that we also had to adapt it to the building regulation, meaning making it accessible. Also, at some of the situations, the caves were very narrow, so at least we have to widen them also up to kind of the minimum that of in terms of building regulations requirements. So this kind of negotiation between the original cave and also kind of then adapt the contemporary kind of requirements, that was a very interesting development. And you here see it from the outside. A super complex kind of building. It took kind of long time to to build it in very, very small stages, and also contemporary artists were involved to recreate the paintings in the interior. And what is really interesting, through the very, very thorough process of scanning the existing cave, one discovered also layers that were not accessible before doing that process. So in a way, we also discovered new layers of history within that construction. So here you see some of the images of the final result. And if you remember the initial rendering from the competition, it's very, very close to the build result. So it's also accessible. So it's both kind of you can access it from the roof, and here you have these also breakout situations within the path. And what was also important to us when you go through this kind of cave, that you also are able to relate yourself back to the present. So we created this kind of breakout gardens, the cave gardens, where you see the sky and everything, and also the interior furniture we did. Some of the build locations are very, very close to the competition situation, the build result and the competition rendering. So you can see the way dealing with landscape and architecture, that's very, very close to our initial approach, dealing with the local context and also always including the site-specific condition in our design. And another example for this landscape architecture landscape approach is a museum that we have built some years ago in the north of Norway. And here also we had a context that was, one part was had monument, historic monument restriction, like an old church. So how do we can then locate a new construction within a protected site? So what we basically did, very simple, we thought, okay, we have this landscape, we make a cut in the landscape. So we work with a negative volume, and then the new program, our museum for this Norwegian writer Petter Dass, was then relocated within the negative form. So you can hear the section that we did within the mountain. It's very, very clean cut. And then the location of the museum. So from the land side, it appears very modest, but then again from the fjord side, it has more presence in a way. So here I thought there is a break planned within the lecture. Is this a good break? It's because then I can start afterwards with another path of our work. I think that could also be content-wise a good break, and I think now it's time for coffee, or yeah. Thank you. So I will continue with a series of projects that are related to the task of sustainability. As I tried to tell you a little bit about the other project I showed earlier, that the core interest of our work and our kind of involvement is the responsibility in terms of the human values and interaction, and the social responsibility in all our projects. But of course, it's also the responsibility in terms of the longevity of the planet. So also what the carbon footprint that you create within the building industry. And we have challenged ourselves also within a series of cooperation models, and also try to actively put a lot of research resources into the topic of sustainability. So I will start a very small project that was actually an art project for the Marina Bay Light Art Festival in Asia, a sustainability festival, and we created a very, very small pavilion just to reflect on light and sustainability, and light also as the source for life. So very basic concept. We work with the local material, the bamboo, and we created a kind of a shelter, a small roof in a way. And then we work with a very, very simple photovoltaic light source. So basically what this building does in the daytime, it collects the light, and in the evening it gives the light back. And that is also important to have in mind in locations also in Asia and everywhere on the planet that are off-grid, that the terms of education and light and reading and so on, that's a direct link for that. And that's just a big jump now more again to the Scandinavian context. We have several alliances within the building industry where we actively also try to look into the possibility to develop plus energy houses. So this is a cooperation. It's a single family house that we developed together with contributors from the building industry, and with a very high ambition level, meaning that this is a plus energy building. But what is very important, that we also compensate for all the embodied energy that is located in the materials within the building. So that is a quite different approach to more traditional plus energy houses that only have focus on producing energy, not also taking response for the whole life change. So you see, it's a very basic approach, and it also integrates passive and active measures. And what I think is very important also, that we work with the recycled materials. So what you see here is the brick. I know there's also a theme here in this area, but we work with the recycled material from an old barn that we managed to introduce into this project. And Snøhetta is also part of an alliance that is called the Powerhouse Alliance. And here we are together with other contributors from the building industry to developing plus energy houses with a very strong definition, meaning that we also compensate for all the embodied energy within a building within a 60-year lifespan. That is quite ambitious in terms of that you also have to include elements that you have to exchange, like a window has a shorter lifespan, for example, and then you have to change it several times within the calculation of 60 years. So the first project that we actually realized was a refurbishment project, a very ordinary office building from the 80s. And we have some restriction in terms of building regulation, change of facades, and so on. And I would just briefly show you how we kind of dealt with this refurbishment and this sustainability topics. That was before very, very traditional situation in offices, and that how we managed to implement our sustainable approach, but also kind of changing the inner soul of the project. So I think, and here you see an overview, it's more the collection of passive and active measures, enabling that these houses are going into plus also within this wide lifespan. And we have other developments like this new office building going on within the same alliance, just to show you also that our work is kind of also trying to embrace that part. And the very fresh project that is directly taken from the drawing board is that we also are developing a hotel project within the same alliance model, a so-called powerhouse resort in the north of Norway. And I would just briefly show you some parts of the concept. So we tried, as we always do, try to find a kind of local reference in a way how to approach that. And we used the crab as an inspiration. So we have developed a concept that is both feasible on land and the water. So I don't know if you have followed the press recently, because this project was just recently launched some weeks ago in the international press. So it's really a groundbreaking piece of architecture, since it's also capable to have a hotel within that types of definition. So we use references also from local building tradition, a robu, like it's called in Norwegian, that is traditional fisherman house, and also then from then developed the take on the construction that it has direct local references, but also kind of has a contemporary approach. So what is very important, and that's why I show this slide with the more technical diagrams, but it always has to do with passive and active measures. So for a hotel, for example, you have to look a deep dive into the user behavior, and you have to kind of look into what type of foundations are we choosing, because that is all an impact on the overall sustainability calculation. And that also gives you completely different guidelines for developing architecture. We call it form follows environment. And also we use active parameters when we measure the solar harvesting possibilities. And that also guides us to an active shaping of the roof according to the sun direction and measurements. I just show you a plan for this hotel. It's about 10,000 square meters. And it's about a lot of the outdoor experience that you will have in this location, and also means of transport will be quite important so that we don't increase traffic. So also the ferry that will transport the tourists to that remote location will have a carbon neutral energy source. So form follows environment in a more wider sense. We have been engaged in a large urban or suburban development in close to the Paris, to the airport Charles de Gaulle. And I will just show you a little bit how we then upscale that method or approach when we have to kind of embrace such a huge program. That was actually an urban development about 200,000 square meters, a mixed-use program. And what we did also, that we wanted to preserve the farmland, because we have one mantra at our office is that we never build on farmland. So how do we deal with that aspect? So we tried actually a little bit the same as we did with the opera. We just included the farmland on top of the building, so that we, within our vision of a project of that size, also we're able to kind of, and enhance the local agriculture and kind of, we grow it, you smell it, and also have this local food production as part of the development. This project, we didn't win it in the end, and to be honest, I'm also a little bit, I think it's okay that we didn't, because it also had an indoor ski ramp, so one could be a little bit doubting about really the sustainability part when you have to include those programs that are not really feasible within that climate zone. But again, this form follows environment. If you transfer it to more to other contexts, I will show you a series of smaller interventions. This was an art project that we did with a photographer in Sweden. And the basic approach was to frame beautiful views in a landscape together with the eye of with the photographer's eye. So he was selecting the motifs, and we were following with small landscape interventions and framing the views that he had picked. So that was a very, very interesting approach, and a direct reference where form follows environment, because the views were kind of guided for us. And I don't know if you have heard about these series of projects. In Norway, we have a state-funded program that is called the Nasjonale Turistveier, the National Touristic Roads. And that was a program that was rolled out quite some years ago, meaning that the beauty of the nature was kind of demonstrated with small architectural interventions along the national roads through Norway. You know that Norway is a very narrow but long country, so we have quite some distances in remote locations. So we were one of the first generations of architects that designed these small resting places, like this one in Lofoten in the north of Norway. So these were kind of small architectural interventions. So these were kind of state-founded competitions. And now I think we already have the fourth generation of architects and also allowing young architects to do project of that kind, which you know is not so easy always. So this is in Eggum. And another project that has the same kind of contextual reference was a small hunting lodge that we built for also for a photographer, but that also is so remote, located in the Norwegian mountains, that all the materials has to be brought to the site by horse. Actually, this lodge also allows for occupancy of about 15 people, so it's mainly about putting up a tent in the nature, but then transferred to cottage category. So here you see it's almost blending into to the nature. Another example of that kind of typology is a very young, fresh project. It was opened last year, and I don't know if you've heard about the tree hotels in Sweden. It's a private hotel that has a concept based on small cottages with a very bold architectural expressions, and every of these cottages had a different architectural. I don't want to use the word style, but since they are giving the different projects to different architects, that creates a different variety of expressions. So we tried in a very simple approach to solve that task. So what we started with a very classic typology, a cabin, and then since the task was to work with the tree dimension, we just lifted it up into the air. So you see it here when you approach the forest, the nice pine forest. And the closer you come to the cabin, it's very much also about the forced facade, which is here. Here we have mounted an installation of a print of trees already guiding you up to the theme. It's a print that has basically sky and trees reflected on the underside of the building. So here you see it on the more northern light perspective. So that's also a good example how we kind of work with the classic typologies and then giving it our own notion by kind of rewriting the story in a way. And we are staying in Norway, in the Lofoten area. Oh, now we went Sweden, but we were in Norway, now going back to Norway. And we'll show you a small intervention. It's also a hotel project, but also to show you how the different contents and also the different contextual situations leads to these site-specific answers and architectures that we create. So this is a site. It's very close to the shoreline. And what we did for this project, we looked very carefully into the local building tradition, how the kind of organizational model of inhabiting fishermen inhabiting the small fjords and bays, how they kind of protect themselves to the harsh climate conditions. And also we looked at how animals inhabit nature and what are the kind of, what do you find as kind of contextualized site-specific traces within that context. And we, from this kind of analytic approach, we created a very site-specific language in a way that kind of solved that. That was our answer for this site. So it's also a hotel and it's a work in progress. But I think it was very well dealing with this context that actually is more nature and architecture, and should one really place architecture in that part of nature and landscape. So dealing with the kind of the nuances of this. And I will finalize today and show you a project that is not built but now under construction. And that's actually a project that had an explosion in social media. We got a commission for an underwater restaurant at the tip of southern Norway. So it's really a challenging task because we have never dealt with that kind of program before, and it was a very confident client and that gave us this task. So this is the site. You can see here it's a beautiful harbor view. This is a location. So what is also very interesting about this project that we have since some years also have a brand design department within Snøhetta. So some of our project we have the possibility to also work with the identity and communication part. So with this project we have actively our brand design department on board from the very beginning. And when we looked at, we developed the identity of the project, we very quickly came to the name Under for this restaurant. And in terms of the Norwegian language, it's very interesting because Under means also wonder, under in Norwegian. So playing with the name and also that again leads to the identity of the project. That's also part of our visual identity and brand design work. So I show you here some sections. And what is also interesting with that project that we will also use it for maritime research, kind of how does underwater life kind of react to that kind of building, and also then develop a typology that can both be located in land and water. So it's basically a concrete pipe. So we work very closely with this maritime industry also to dimension a project of that kind. I mean, we had no experience how thick a glass wall, a window of that kind should be, or what type of construction will survive all the salt and the seawater situation. So here are some conceptual sections. And then we also had the possibility for that project to, as I told you, the visual identity. So we worked also with all the graphic design and the color palette that also had a direct link then to the interior and also the menu and the branding and the website of the project. So that's part here from our brand design work and also the logo. And we also develop a font for this project. So also then how the logo, the name, and the graphics and the communication part of that project is reflected in the material. So that's actually the way we love to work when we are allowed to have this holistic approach to our project, when we also can think about the visual identity and the communication part of architecture, which is a very important part. And I think it's also very underestimated part of our profession, because it's very much about how you speak about your project, how you are able to communicate them. And you see also here some materials from the interior, how we try to reflect on this under and maritime part. And here are some visualizations from underwater. And this will be my last slide, and it will be opened end of this year. So I think it's already possible to book tables if you want. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so let's start the question parts. Does anybody has a question to our guest lecturer? Okay, maybe I will start with a standard question which we ask our every guest lecturer, because today you spent a day in Katowice. Mm-hmm. And could you say what are your impressions about our city?
I think it's, or at least from the few hours I spent together with you today, and also the small guided tour I got from your museum back to the hotel. I think it seems to me like it's a city in development, that you have some kind of milestones introduced already that are kind of in dialogue with the more traditional pattern and the industrial and the different kind of ages of the city. So I'm very curious what will happen next. So I think you're on a good path. I saw some very nice contemporary project also, especially the Institute of Cinema, right? Or I don't know the
Radio, TV, University, it was this
yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah. So I understood that you also have an issue with the brick interpretation, and I found it was very intelligent way to transfer that material also in a contemporary way. But I see also that you have some challenges with the river, or yeah. So I'm interesting. I will follow your urban development, see how it goes within the next decade.
Okay, is there anybody who has any question to Jette? Okay.
Hello. So I have noticed that the basic of your of Snøhetta are the values that you were mentioning during the lecture, and I wanted to ask how you recruit people. Do you recruit them with the values already inside them, or that you pass the values when they are recruited?
Very good question, because it's a lot about the new generation, and when you are growing as an office, it's a mixed process. We never have a kind of announcement that we have some vacant positions, so it's most about that the people that are already in Snøhetta give recommendations about people they know. So that is kind of the first stage that already, in a way, guarantees a little bit that those people that are recommended by the people are already part of Snøhetta, that they are kind of feel that those could also represent those values. And of course, every time when we have then a new employee and a new part of the Snøhetta family, as we call it, we try to guide them also through this kind of introduce to the culture, let them very early participate in the different methods, concept workshop, because those are things you have also to learn by experience. But I think you should bring then a more basic attitude that you want to share, and the generosity and curiosity, and also that you want to work with that field of innovation, because it's not easy always, and it requires also something from everyone, that you want to contribute and share yourself and share your knowledge and really work within that team spirit that we do. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so once again, a big thank you for coming to Katowice,
Yeah,
for
thank
making
you
time
very
to
much
come
for the
here.
invitation.
We have a little. Is there anyone else?
was
Okay,
a
I
question
didn't
there.
see you. Excuse me.
Sorry, I'm late. I saw in your office,
Where
I
are
think
you?
it was in Oslo,
Oh, there, yeah.
bags filled with some liquid water. It looks like
Have you been? Oh, yeah,
lamp or something.
Yeah.
What's the idea of that?
No, that was actually an installation for a party. We had, I think it was our 15th anniversary, where we invited colleagues and everyone to our office. And that was an installation that was done by a young architect. It was a double sinus curved geometry. And he just made this kind of installation in the roof to reflect where the dancing floor was. So, and that was quite stable. So we have only renewed it once. So it has been there for some years. That's actually super simple. Plastic bags with water. But you have to be quite precise how to hang it then, so it follows that geometry. But it's a very nice reflection then of the social area. So that's where we have our sofas and and dancing floor, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there was someone up of our auditorium who had a question. Okay, here you are.
have a question about this project. You're saying about many problems with finishing it. Do you remember any dimensions, like how thick was this glass and how big was it, and how did you really did it? Like, was it like done before and after putting in the water as one element?
It will be, some of it will be prefabricated, and then it will, most of it will actually be prefabricated, and then will be foundations on in the water. Yeah, the thickness of the glass is like this. So it's, but then again, we had to include maritime engineers from submarine industry. So just to kind of learn about that category to build actually a submarine restaurant. So we haven't done that before. That's all about then this interdisciplinary approach, that you get the right team on board to help you to develop a project of a category that is in a way unexplored also for us. And that, we love that. When we can do something new, that's perfect. Yeah. So it actually wasn't so problematic. We had a very engaged client who wanted this very much. So it was more about to get the right competence on board in order to solve the challenges. But it was, with them on board, then that was then easy in a way. But now we will build it. We just started the building process, so we'll see how that goes. We are quite curious about that. And as maybe I can mention that also within those projects, and we are also working with industry partners. So we are developing a specific fabric for that project, and that's also interesting when we get this kind of add-on project and innovation, but with partners within the industry with acoustic elements, or sometimes we design a chair specifically for a project. So that's nice when we can do this complete holistic approach. I don't know if that was a good answer, but yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, here you are.
Okay, I have a question about how do you split your forces so you have many different projects to make, and about who has the final voice on a solution for a project, how many people works on one, because you have 6 places around the world, and how it goes.
Well, maybe these are several questions. I mean, we, within the different location of our offices, we handle the portfolios that are kind of within a geographic region. We handle them individually, but we also cooperate in terms of knowledge. That's the first. Of course, the team planning and resource planning is a very important part, that you get the right suitable competences, and also in terms of age, experience, and also curiosity. So we have a person only working with teams to get the right, to curate the right teams that is suitable for a project. Yeah, was that an answer, or yeah? So it's all about the mapping, and then of course it's sometimes challenging when we do competition. That's something we can't control when we have to do them, but suddenly they are announced, and then we have to deal with that. But we try to give us some guidelines that we limit, for example, the number of competitions we do in parallel, so that we are able also to put the right teams on them. But what we don't have specific competition teams, so we always mix so that everyone can. We are quite general in our approaches. And you said also who has the final decision of the design. That's always the team. So that's very, very clear spoken. The team has the responsibility, but we have also developed internal methods that we call the sprint. So that we that's a kind of mix of transpositioning, but also in terms of time, we give us a quite limited time in the very beginning, and work with dedicated time, dedicated team, and we make a kind of critic after that phase, where we also invite external persons, ideally, into the evaluation, if that's a feasible concept to go ahead. So, but it's the team who is responsible. So we don't have one Snøhetta voice. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a person up of the auditorium, so here you are.
I have a question, and don't take it wrong. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Because you were saying a lot about sustainability in your projects, but here you, and don't take it wrong, really. Here you present the project that is really commercial and I guess really expensive to a place that is really, I mean, delicate probably and very, very nature-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, what do you think about these two things going, along?
Yeah, it's of course not an old project where we can have introduce this super ambitious level of sustainability. We try, and also within this project, yeah, it's a good point. What we tried with this, at least, that it would also be a research project for maritime biology. So we will also allow then researchers to use this access to underwater to have this kind of additional research going on. But in terms of footprint, I think we try to limit also the impact of materials by using low carbon concrete. So when we do transfer, we also try to be very conscious about our choices there. But I agree, you can be critical when you compare those two approaches, but still we try to be reasonable and then conscious about the choices we do. But always then try to widen up the possibility within the project, then again with the maritime biology research aspect in it.
Okay, there was a person next to you with a question, so please.
Yes, I have a question. When and where you open an office in Poland?
Give us a project. Yeah, we just laughed about it earlier because we are working internationally and I'm following competition, what's going on. But no, we haven't so far got the possibility. Of course, we would love to. So if there is a possibility, we come, of course.
So we invite you to Katowice. There is still a lot of things to do here.
Yeah.
However, it is a great city, as you saw today. The best in Poland. Is there anyone else who has a question? Okay, here we are. Yes, come on.
Where?
So I have a question about the materials, because you said that it's one of the most important things in the architecture. So, for example, structure in your projects are the ramach, then the materials are the style of the words we use. So I would like to ask, what's the process of choosing the materials you use in your architecture? Because for me, the way you do it is like the masterpiece. For example, the culture center in the Abu Dhabi or in the Middle East was amazing and so great to put the idea of the whole project in one type of material you used on the elevation with those pipes. So how do you look for the materials and what's the process of evaluation?
Yeah, that's quite complex question. I'll try to answer it because it goes along different criteria. One is kind of the coherence, firstly, the coherence with the concept. So it should always be a kind of refinement of the concept, so it should not work against it. That's on the kind of conceptual level. Then, of course, we always, and as we were correctly pointing out, we are working very much from a holistic, if we should say formal perspective within our project, trying to enhance the form more than, or the sculptural, the three-dimensional aspect of a project, more that we are so much interested in working with separating elements, like in the more modernistic architecture, like walls and floors and ceiling. So we're working more from a kind of sculptural way, kind of method-wise when we are kind of working with when we are so far that we are working with the specific form. So that also has an impact on the choice and especially on the number of materials. When you take the opera, for example, we made a rule that never more than 2 materials should meet, maximum 3. Just that there is no concurrence between material and form and expression, so that the material always kind of strengthens the spatial experience. It's not kind of going in a competition with that experience. And then, of course, where we have the possibility, the sustainable part, kind of we look carefully into the value chain of the material. We try to work with local materials where possible. So in the Saudi Aramco center, we have this kind of steel pipe, and you can question it in terms of sustainability, of course, but it should also have the purpose of cooling the building. But then we also have the rammed earth. So we worked quite long time to find the right recipe for the rammed earth material that we have in the interior of the building. So the whole plaza and the museum walls, that was made of local materials, rammed earth that has the same stability as concrete. So mixing the local sand into that. It's a reflection of the materials on several levels. So when we kind of when it has gone through all these criteria that I've just sketched out, then we feel that something then has clicked in place, and that is kind of, strengthening the overall approach. I think that is always has a link back to the overall approach, so that the material aspect is never an isolated task. That's very important.
Okay, here you are.
Which architecture objects or places in Oslo do you recommend besides the Opera House? Do you have any favorite?
Yeah, there are some nice. You should of course visit the Holmenkollen, the ski jump. That was rebuilt some years ago. There are more some kind of hidden treasures in a way. We don't have so many bold projects like the opera, but now within the whole area of Björvika, where the opera is located, the opera was the start of an urban development that is finished in 2020. So now we have a new monk museum that is under construction. That was Herreros who won that, the Spanish architect. Then we have a new public library that is constructed within the same area. So that is super interesting, the whole Björvika aspect. That is both a master plan in terms of master plan, but also within the different typologies. So that's an interesting area to look at. Yeah, and then we have some smaller projects that are too long to list here. Send me a mail. I can send you some recommendations. We have some nice, especially infill projects also within the refurbishment projects in Oslo, and our own office is also very nice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I think it was the last question. So
Okay.
once again, thank you very much. We have a little gift for you.
Oh.
So thanks again for making time and giving this great
Thank you
speech
for your
about
time, because
this
that's the
fantastic
most
and amazing
precious
project.
we have. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So big thank you. I na zakończenie, once again, a big applause for our Master of Architecture, Jette Hopp.
Thank you.
Również chciałbym w imieniu Stowarzyszenia całego podziękować wszystkim, również tym, którzy już teraz wychodzą z sali. Nie będą wiedzieć, co mamy w najbliższym czasie do zaprezentowania. Natomiast w naszym stowarzyszeniu dzieje się bardzo wiele ciekawych rzeczy. Przede wszystkim obecnie odbywające się czy trwające organizowane konkursy architektoniczne, do wzięcia udziału, w których bardzo serdecznie wszystkich zapraszam. Dzisiaj również mija termin ostateczny składania wniosków do warsztatów dla banku ING, który przygotowujemy. Jeszcze jest szansa te parę godzin, żeby swoje wstępniaki wysłać, także fajne nagrody i na pewno warto się pokazać. W najbliższym czasie film i miasto.
Tak, ja już się nie mogę doczekać, bo powiem wam, że ta pani ze zdjęcia będzie się ruszać, czyli 24 kwietnia mamy Before, przed film i miasto, drugą edycją i Jane Jacobs przemówi do nas z ekranu i z kart książki, ponieważ będzie miała wtedy premierę, także książka wydana przez Centrum Architektury, Wielkie Małe Miasta i dyskusja. Z Grzegorzem Piątkiem, wydawcą i z Martą Żakowską, która jest przedstawicielem magazynu Miasto.
Tak, i to jest Before, który zapowiada tak naprawdę cały ciąg wydarzeń, które się będą odbywały przez cały maj.
Tak, zdradzamy, co
chyba
będzie?
kilkanaście różnych wydarzeń w całych Katowicach.
Przeglądy filmowe, wycieczki, warsztaty dla wszystkich. Warsztaty dla dzieci, wycieczki także dla dorosłych, również i filmy.
I filmy przede wszystkim, dla których architektura i miasto jest tłem, no i dyskusje z mniej lub bardziej znanymi architektami, no i towarzysząca temu aura.
Ja nie mogę się doczekać,
inspiracji.
muszę powiedzieć, co będzie najpierw 8 maja, bo wtedy zaczynamy i zaczynamy.
Nie zdradzę.
Nie, proszę.
No dobrze.
Dobra, będzie film Gigi Wiertowa, człowiek z kamerą, z muzyką na żywo, elektronika połączona z muzyką klasyczną. Serdecznie zapraszamy.
W zeszłym roku sala była pełna na otwarciu. Myślę, że w tym roku dostawimy te 3 krzesła i jakoś damy radę. No i majówka, która w tym roku jest w czerwcu.
Tak,
z tego, co
9
pamiętam.
czerwca, więc wszystkich zapraszamy. Jeszcze tak szybciutko chciałam powiedzieć, że 18 kwietnia spotykamy się w Sarpie, ponieważ organizujemy debatę o architekturze. Tak się złożyło, że chyba większość prelegentów czy występujących w tej debacie jest profesorami, bo będzie i Magdalena Żmudzińska, i Bolesław Stelmach, i Henryk Mercik, więc zapraszamy, będziemy rozmawiać o architekturze PRL-u, co z nią robimy, jak ją postrzegamy, czy pamiętamy, czy jej bronimy i czy przyjmujemy ją w nasze dziedzictwo.
Przyjmujemy. Tak.
Przyjmujemy. Dobrze.
Ja dziękuję jeszcze raz i
Dziękujemy.
do zobaczenia.